Se riprendiamo
Okay, then, welcome back and good morning, everyone. Please take a seat. Let's start this second day, which is going to be as interesting and intense like the one we enjoyed together yesterday. Now, today we have the honor to have with us the person who first introduced, facilitated communication, Rose Mary Crossley. Okay, this is it. Enjoy the meeting.
Buongiorno. You have now heard all my Italian. Whoops. I beg your pardon? It's working. Now, final check. Can you hear me? Yes, good. Okay. I am very old, and I started working with what is now known as facilitated communication or facilitated communication training in 1977 with Anne MacDonald, who is on the slide up there. Anne had severe cerebral palsy and had been placed in a terrible institution for children who were thought to be severely or profoundly intellectually impaired. IQs less than 35. Anne couldn't walk, talk, or feed herself. And she lay on the floor in the institution with no therapy or education from the age of 3 until Chris and I, wave your hand, took her home for the weekend in 1977. She was 16 years old and weighed 12 kilos. 12 kilos. You could carry her like this. The institution starved children, hoping that they would die young. For your amusement, this is the Russian view of the first weekend we took Anne out, which led to us being here today. At the time, I thought Anne had a mental age of 5 or 6, which was a lot more than the hospital thought. They thought a mental age of 1, if that. But we took her to an art gallery, and it was her interest in the pictures and the sense of humour that she showed in front of a Toulouse-Lautrec of a fat man in evening dress dancing, who had obviously had too much to drink, that made me think that she was a lot more aware than people had thought. And one of my books has been translated into Russian, and this is an illustration from an article. We live in a state called Victoria. So they thought we must be Victorians and put us into old-fashioned clothes. I think Anne, who very sadly died in 2010, Anne would have thought this was very funny. But anyway, it's my work with Anne that led to us being here today. Anne went on to leave the hospital, go to university, give presentations at conferences like this around the world, and won the National Disability Award in Australia for personal achievement, all without saying a word. Anyway, to my topic for today, and I will try and keep to time in the way that you are so reliable in Italy in doing. Nobody laughed. You have no sense of humour. I am... Yes, well, particularly when you're relying on your wonderful translators. Now, I'm combining 2 presentations here, one about the use of iPads to increase independence and to increase hand skills, and the second about the cognitive assessments that we have been able to do with people who now have improved hand skills. I'm not going to read out every slide. You all know that to use communication aids with your hands, you have to be able to point reliably, with or without support, and have good eye-hand coordination. We started, as I said, in 1977, and my first use of facilitation was with people who had severe physical impairments, who usually had severe cerebral palsy. And these were people who, like Anne, could not walk, talk, or feed themselves. In 1986, the Government of Australia funded us to open the first centre for people who could not speak in Australia. And we saw people of every diagnosis and every age. And we were very surprised. Instead of most of our students arriving in wheelchairs, most of our students walked in and could feed themselves. They were people with diagnoses of autism or Down syndrome or cognitive impairment. But very few of them could point accurately or functionally. So we started to devise a program to teach them to point, and we couldn't delay their communication while they learnt to point independently, because that can take years. So we started using communication aids, very simple communication aids, because this is before any of the electronic devices that we know now. There were very, very few speaking devices, and they were terrible. So the therapy team worked at devising a training program to develop shoulder strength, pointing skills, eye-hand coordination, posture, a whole lot of things to help people use communication aids. And we called the program Facilitated Communication Training. We did not see facilitation as a goal in itself. We hoped that people would go on to use communication aids independently. Oh, what happened there? My apologies. What? Sorry about that. I didn't do it, I promise. The program that we developed then ran in much the same way until 2010. It was taken up in countries around the world, and unfortunately, people tended to stick at the level of being facilitated, of communicating with support, for various reasons. Some people really were not ever going to be able to use communication aids without support. Other people were slower without support. And in a lot of cases, people just didn't want to take the time to do the actual therapy, or they didn't have the resources to do the actual therapy that could lead to independence. This changed in 2010. Yes! The first iPads came to Australia in May 2010, and I remember that because I was at the airport to get one of the first ones. I had an iPod. I knew this was going to be the game changer. And we have found it to be a game changer. Today, most of the students who come to see us can use a tablet with one finger, and they look at what they're doing as they search YouTube for their favourite movies or whatever. They may not be doing what we see as productive tasks, but my goodness, they've got the hand skills that we had taken years to develop 20 years previously. Now we use specially chosen apps to work on hand skills, and also to give people access to academic tasks that they may not have been able to do, and to find out what people can do. We are still seeing, tragically, people who arrive, who have been at our terrible schools. By the way, Italy is much, much better than we are. You're better in facilitation, you're better in message passing, and you have a better education system. You will see more about this as I go on. But we have been seeing people arrive who've been through our school system, who have little or no speech, and have not been given any form of communication, and have not been taught to read or taught to do anything. They may have taught themselves to read, but nobody has even found that out because they couldn't read aloud. Our first thing with new people is to check for literacy skills, and then we go on checking for math skills, etc., etc. And with the amount of literacy exposure in today's world, and because you need to find your favourite videos online, they can all read, just about. It is very rare to find a child without some literacy skills, regardless of what formal education they have had. It's very interesting. I've been working on finding apps that either have an Italian version or don't require any language. And this is my current list. And I've got screenshots of some of these, but the wonderful media people, thank you, have shown me how I can actually link the iPad and show you some of these. So let's do it. Do you cross your fingers in Italy if you want something to happen, right? I'm crossing my fingers. Come on. This is an app for babies. And when I say babies, we can now wind the clock back. When I was studying child development, I was taught that cause and effect came in at the age of 18 months. That was always ridiculous, because obviously a baby calling for its mother has cause and effect. But we couldn't test it. Now we can. Oh, open the door.
Tacchino.
Open the door. Oh, it's up the top.
Gufo.
Close the door. Close the door. Now, I use this with every baby I see. The youngest to use it deliberately and purposely have been less than 3 months old. And it's been reported to me that it's been used by 6 weeks old. I'm perfectly prepared to believe it. I just didn't find a 6-week-old.
Gatto.
Is the sound coming through? Okay. I can't hear it. Good. Okay. Enough. You've done preschool. Now, what next? There's all kinds of apps. There's apps for literacy exposure.
Il corvo assetato. In una giornata calda, un corvo molto assetato volava in cerca di acqua.
You all know the story.
Il corvo assetato.
Right. I don't think you need the whole thing. But isn't it wonderful? I have a 3-year-old who loves those, with severe cerebral palsy who's not going to talk. And he's got literacy skills. Now, we are also interested, of course, in working with hand skills. Some of you may know this app, Flow Free. Uh-oh. Right. That is terrific for eye-hand coordination. It is just wonderful. And you can start doing it coactively, helping the person. The idea is for them to do it by themselves, of course. Now, junior math. Okay, are you able to do the sum? Spot the deliberate mistake. I lost 5,000 points. Okay, you get the idea. Now, kids love doing that. It teaches them to do some sums. It also teaches them multiple choice. It gives them confidence. And it teaches them that it doesn't matter if you make a mistake. It is very important for the teacher to make lots of mistakes. Now, for the more advanced child, older child, and I put Julia's name on this. Oh, easy. Okay, you get the idea. Okay, and I believe it asks for the smallest answer. So you have to do 4 sums to answer. And there's a timer on it. So, mental arithmetic. But if you've never been able to show people that you can add up before, this is very exciting. And we have the kids doing it independently, like I'm doing it, from a very early stage. You'd like to come up and do some later. Now, in case you want to be creative, oops, bad. I am not trying to make beautiful here, but you can now sell this online and you can email it to friends. Yes, and the hand skills. Hey, it's good. There's a whole range of puzzles. Oh, be good. Ah.
Duck, duck, moose. Slide the pieces. Excellent.
Do what you silly thing. Ooh. Okay, we do a lot of drag and drop for all kinds of things. And of course, there are apps that teach you the basics of computer programming. And this one's in Italian. I always get this wrong. I never know which way to turn. Ah, good. What? Okay, cool. You can teach anything on an iPad. And the motivation for hand skills is enormous. I won't bore you with the others, and of course you all know about the Italian version of
Ciao.
okay. Good stuff. Oh, and, of course, the drag and drop letters.
Ciao. A. A. C. C. I.
Get it?
Q. I. O. T. O. G. A. T. 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 T.
Come on, you silly thing.
T. 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 O. TTO.
What?
TTO.
Not the way I thought it was going to sound. Anyway, it is meant to be speaking in Italian. Ha. Anyway, there's a lot of things out there. Now, let's move right along, which involves a bit of rewiring. Are you able to say what, are you able to understand what I'm talking about? I'll try and have some time for questions at the end. Maybe. Maybe. Ah. And I put some of these up. We'll just go through them very quickly. Oh, the coin one is nice. And as well as the coins, there's a wonderful time-telling one, which I don't think I've got here. And one of the things that we want to make very clear is that it's important to improve people's hand skills as much as possible before trying any formal assessment. You need people to be able to do assessments without support for the assessments to be considered valid. Anne did some of a Peabody picture vocabulary test without support, dragging her hand over a table in the Supreme Court of Victoria. And that was in 1979, a long time ago. We have been very concerned that in our state, children with little or no speech are being assessed using IQ tests that require spoken answers. This is as sensible as giving a blind child a colour matching test. It makes no sense at all. And we are very keen to improve cognitive assessments. Historically, there has always been an assumption that people who could not speak fluently were stupid. That is, of course, totally wrong, but it has dominated psychological thought for hundreds of years. I'm not reading through all this, but the terminology in 1838 was that people with no speech were idiots. That, in fact, has not significantly changed. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, DSM-4, which was current for the next 20 years, talked about profoundly retarded people as having little or no speech, and said that their communication skills might improve, but obviously not their cognitive status. And still, speech was seen in 1994 as identical with language. It was not considered that you could understand but not be able to speak, unless you were deaf. And non-speech communication was being widely used by people with cerebral palsy and other disabilities by 1994, but the diagnostic manual made no mention of this and no suggestion that that could alter the underlying cognitive status. As I've said, we come from the state of Victoria. It's not the worst state in Australia. It's one of the only states, one of the few states, where all children, regardless of disability, are entitled to go to their neighbourhood schools. So all children could go to ordinary schools, but parents of children with significant disabilities are counselled against this, and there are no special schools for people with autism and normal intelligence. There's no special schools for people who can't talk of normal intelligence. If you go into the special system, you have to be assessed as IQ less than 70 or IQ less than 50. Most children with little or no speech are assessed as having IQs less than 50 because the test requires spoken answers, which they cannot give. And they end up in truly terrible schools. They have no access to speaking children at all. They receive no education, very little therapy, no communication aids, or only the most simple pictures. And the schools have no libraries or textbooks or syllabus. This is appalling. And I'll sit down to read some of this. I suppose I could read it from up there. This is a letter that our Department of Education sent to me in 2016 after I had written to the Minister. Standardised measures are part of the procedure for determining eligibility for the program for students with disability. It's essential that the procedures are consistent and the variations in score are not attributable to different test instruments. So the same test will be used for everyone, whether they're blind, deaf, quadriplegic, or unable to speak. Who's got the problem? Excuse me, where do they get these people? Anyway, and in order to achieve this, a common test is needed. The Wechsler tests are recommended. They are a valid and reliable tool. And Australian norms are available. Sorry. There are no norms for people with disabilities. So someone who can't talk is assessed on exactly the same IQ test as I would be given. It's a difference. one size does not fit all. Professor Zapinski proved that the squid is more intelligent than the house cat when posed with puzzles under similar conditions. I only wish that it was our Department of Education that was drowning. I strongly disapprove of intelligence testing. I want to make that clear. I had a letter published in the New Scientist earlier this year disapproving of IQ testing, which makes it amusing that I am now doing an awful lot of IQ testing. The only way to demonstrate to the Education Department that they were wrong was to find tests that were suitable for children with little or no speech and administer those tests and see how well the children did. And that's what we did. And we bought different tests, Peabody Picture Vocabulary Test, Raven's Standard Progressive Matrices, and the Comprehensive Test of Nonverbal Intelligence. We had criteria for students before they undertook testing. They had to be able to see, hear, and choose between 4 items independently. And more items for the Ravens and C. Tony tests. Doug Bicklin, Dr. Bicklin, took the films of the testing. Wherever possible, the testing was videoed. Obviously, the family had to give consent. All the students we tested had previously been assessed as IQ below 50 or IQ below 70. Most of the older people had worked with facilitation to improve their hand skills over an extended period of time. The younger children had used iPads. And I was able to start testing younger children on their second or third visit to the centre. They had enough independent skills. Yes. Which makes the department's behaviour even less excusable. A lot of students are impulsive and they needed to be held back while they heard the question before they started to point, but they pointed independently. I'm going to skip this table because it's a bit confusing. We're going to whip past that. There's a better one later. I hope. I'm looking a bit puzzled here. Oh, maybe it didn't. Okay, maybe I do have to show that one. I'm sorry. Okay. I thought I had a different table in here of 40 people, but okay. This is just This is the first 25 who did the Peabody. And it's hard to read. You can see that most of the students attended SDSs, Special Developmental Schools for children with an IQ less than 50. And there's colour coding on the results. The green coding is for below average scores. There is no child with a below average score. Not one. This is a group of children who've been sent to schools for children with IQ less than 50. Not one scored below average. And as you can see, the lowest scores were in the low average range, but still in the average range, and there were only a few of those. Most of the scores were high average. I'm trying to read. Moderately high score. Now, moderately high score doesn't sound so terrific. It's a high score. It goes up to the 90th percentile. And those who got the extremely high score were students who scored above the 90th percentile. That is better than 90 out of 100 children without disabilities. This is serious. This is very serious. We raised our concerns with the department, met with the Department of Education a number of times. Once we showed them videos, there was nothing you could say. The videos were conclusive. After much discussion, they issued revised guidelines saying that other tests could be used for children with little or no speech, but they didn't say they must be used, and nothing changed. Here's still pictures of 4 students undertaking assessments. And their results are there. Victor, who we'll get back to later, student 6, scores 95th percentile on the Peabody, 25th percentile, and absolutely mortified on his first attempt at a Ravens with a different, he wanted another go, and we had a different Ravens test on which he scored on the 90th percentile. He was so upset. And on the C. Tony, the 92nd percentile. So this is a fairly consistent set of results. Another child there, student 13, 95th percentile on the Peabody, 50th percentile on the Ravens. Ravens is a different style of test. It's not connected with vocabulary. You can get the general idea. These are just little samples. And you can see, I hope, that they're pointing without support. Now, I'm going to show you a little piece of video, I hope. Oh, wait a sec, sorry. Hang on, you've got a few to go. Derek, you're doing really, really, really well. Can you hear this? 4 shapes, convex. Good. Are you able to hear it? 4 things, embossed. Okay, let's... Okay, well, I'm just doing one quick solve. Hang on, you've got a few to go. Derek, you're doing really, really, really well. 4 shapes, convex. Good. 4 things, embossed. Oh, I promised somebody. Hang on, you've got a few to go. Legume. Now, we now go into the impossible zone for the last 2 items. Osculating. Osculating. Close but no cigar. It's a really unusual word for kissing. Comes from the Italian. This is near the end of the test. It's Latin. Very hard. The Italian as well. Come to that. And okay, last one is really stupid. Tonsorial. Tonsorial. Shit. Sorry.
No, wait.
The end.
That's what he's saying.
I promised someone that I'd show the end of the test where I said a rude word when he did get the last question correct. And the word is tonsorial. Tonsorial, which I'm sure can't be translated. It's to do with hair. Anyway, we won't go into that, but Matthew scored absolutely brilliantly, and it was quite amazing. That was one of the early tests. And here's a bit about Matthew. He's got autism, severe dyspraxia, and he can type but not write. He scored on the 99th percentile on the Peabody. And in 2017, he scored above the 90th percentile on the C-Tony. He uses a sophisticated communication aid, which his school didn't like, and he also has scored very well on multiple choice literacy and math skills. When Matthew's school was told about his test results, that made absolutely no change to their behaviour. Matthew had been estimated as having an IQ below 35 by a psychologist. She had brought him to her office at the school to assess him. He looked at what she had on the table, and she reported that he very carefully packed up everything and gave it to her and pointed to the door. She unpacked it again, not being very bright, and he packed it up again very carefully, gave it to her, and pointed to the door. She said he was moderately to severely retarded and clearly did not understand the purpose of the test. And she had a PhD. They must be handing them out in cereal packets. It's a worry. Matthew's school continued to give him preschool tasks. His last school report included this photograph of him with a huge box of white socks, and the task is for him to put 2 socks toe to toe and roll them up. And you can see it's a program, they've got a label on it. This for a child who's more intelligent than the psychologist. Matthew's family gave up. They had come from Malta originally, and they left Australia and went back to Malta. It was tragic. And this was the other report score, but that's for 40 kids, don't worry. Similar results. The Education Department is now saying that they are going to retrain the psychologists, and they have started retraining psychologists. And they have issued they have set up an online site called the Teacher's Toolkit to help teachers working with children with little or no speech, but it's not very good. And they do say, where cognitive assessments are being undertaken with a student with communication support needs, be aware that standardised non-verbal cognitive assessment tools exist and should be used instead of the standard Wechsler tests. Yes! Now, in theory, we have won, but we haven't. The schools have still not changed. Students are still in schools not able to access the regular syllabus despite testing as of average or above average intelligence. About a month ago, a documentary went to air on SBS, one of our government broadcasting channels. It's not meant to be viewable outside Australia, but if you search it under the silent treatment special investigation on YouTube, it will come up and you can play it. the documentary features one of our students, Victor, who was student 15 that I was speaking about earlier. And Victor is self-educated. He uses an app called BrainPop, and it's designed for junior secondary students, and unfortunately there isn't an Italian version. It's in English, and there's various versions of it. But he watches at least one BrainPop a day, emails me to talk to me about what he's seen. His family is Vietnamese and do not speak English. He is doing this all by himself. It took him a long time to develop those typing skills because he started only in the very early days of the iPads. He watched a BrainPop on Martin Luther King, and we looked up King's I Have a Dream speech on YouTube, and Victor was absolutely fascinated. And I said, why don't you write your own dream? And he did. And I am going to, Victor is one of those students, I don't know how many you know, whose ordinary speech is not very good. It's confused, he can't say a lot. But if he's typed something, he can read it out perfectly well. So let's go and see if you can hear Victor reading this. Oops.
I have a dream that important people will see that we are the smartest, not the dumbest. I have a dream that just as blacks equal white, we who cannot talk properly, we will be the equal of those who can.
Well done. Now, in fact, I only gave you Victor reading the first part of his I Have a Dream there. And he went on, and I thought I had the right video, but not. I have a dream that all children will be taught and will learn. I have a dream that important people will see that we are the smartest, not the dumbest. I have a dream that just as blacks equal whites, we who cannot talk properly will be the equal of those who can. I think the prejudice against people with little or no speech is racist. I think it is as unsoundly based and as discriminatory as racism, and needs to be fought in the same way. Thank you for your attention. I haven't done badly as far as time goes. Is the time for any questions? Has anyone got a question? If it's in Italian, someone can interpret it for me. Otherwise, just catch me during the break.
I actually have a question. You were talking before about the schools where there's no education, there's no support, and you in your PDF said there's no textbook.
Ah, yes, come down.
Saying, is that all right? You were saying something before about these schools where children with disability ends up and there's just no treatment, there's no support, but you also said there's no textbooks. So in which way would you define them as schools? Is it just basically a place where you go and spend time at some point? I mean, when I read
They
textbooks...
teach people to count to 5 every year.
Right.
They teach people to match colours every year. They do a preschool program until the students are 18 and they can throw them out. It is absolutely disgusting.
Translation.
Oh,
If someone
thank
wants
you.
to
How very
have
kind.
question in
Yes,
Italian.
and it all worked. Thank you. Any other questions?
No, io volevo solo dire che da noi sicuramente forse
Now, I just wanted to say that okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, I just wanted to say that maybe in Italy is a bit better, but they just count maybe to 20, not to 5, but to 20.
Italy's certainly better.
But we just, okay. It's a provocation. Maybe Italy is better, but maybe we teach to count to 20. So not 5, but 20 with drawings, with the small squares. But, just teach it to count to 20, not to 5.
That was a good comment. A suggestion that Italy was better. They taught children to count to 20, not just to 5. Okay. We need to give people the tools that they will need to have a full and satisfying life and to find whatever purpose or employment that they can find. And counting to 5 or 20 doesn't hack it.
I think Luca had a comment on your presentation.
Oh, yes, sorry.
There is one of our girls here. Okay, there is one of our girls here. So one of our girls, which is in the magazine, and when it comes to research, she asks what can be done next. And actually, we say that scholars should understand what is the pathway of thoughts in our mind, because by formulating expression, it changes and deteriorates. So our thought has to go through barriers and gets lost. So this is what scholars should assess. I mean, language, which is what you were saying. Language has a different path if compared to thinking and thoughts. So if we have a possibility to speech, I mean, this is not, I mean, sometimes expressing our thoughts. So scholars should understand what is the connection between thought and language. This is a question actually asked by one of our girls, of our students.
I think there are obvious issues between the being able to actually speak with your voice and being able to not speak with your voice, but to generate language with your hands or in other ways. There's no particular difference apart from the practical difference. Language is language is language, finds a way out. Think of the differences between all the spoken languages of the world. They're language, and that's the important issue. Look, we must move. I'm in the way. So catch me later if you'd like more conversation. Thank you very much.
We change this?
Well, you've changed quite a lot, Anthony. Anthony says, how can we change this? By showing people that you are capable and can participate in the community. And the more independent people are, the easier it is for that to become obvious. But it's having the ability to communicate is the vital step, and getting that recognized and getting it as an automatic situation in all schools. Now, I've got a quick question for someone from Italy. Does everyone with little or no speech attending school in Italy get access to sophisticated, complex communication systems? With or without facilitation. But the important thing is getting access to a voice. Can anyone answer that question? No? Nobody's?
I am sorry.
Yes, you were doing something else. Okay, Julia, the question was, does every child with little or no speech get an appropriate communication program?
Le valutazioni comunque sono uguali come diceva, no?
Sì.
Cioè,
Talk in English now
Um,
and translate.
So as far as I understand that, of course, we also do standardized tests. Everywhere in the world we do standardized tests. But I think the difference here, is because we have inclusive school and there's no special schools, what often happens is that every case is somewhat different. So you might have a standardized test that shows you have moderate, severe intellectual disability. But then if you find for yourself, for example, to have a facilitator or a communication aid in general in school, and you have a number of teachers, there's some for some reason believe in your ability, then you might actually have support in communication in schools. And I'm not going to say everything is perfect, but it might work out in some cases. Then you have other cases, for example, Mary's experience in high school, which was absolutely horrible. And she found kind of peace with it, only going to university. So it really, I think, anybody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the answer is there's a huge variability about what's happening, and it has less to do with general rules and more to do with the specific people you meet in a school and a specific teacher and how they relate to disability and how they specifically feel about that person. I remember this specific case of this young girl. She was really, really bright. She was very, she has a very good motor competence, but she wasn't independent. And most of all, she had a delayed time frame of understanding. But that was something, teacher accepted FC, it was accepted in general, but they had difficulty with the time thing. So they had to basically, when the teacher were asking questions to her, the support aide was often pulling a little bit her head back and forth to give a yes or no answer in a time frame that was suitable for the school, but wasn't for her. So there are all these weird gray area. Absolutely.
I think people don't believe we are intelligent.
People don't believe we're intelligent.
Yes.
Yeah, that's very true.
Anthony was saying, I think people don't believe we're intelligent. And there needs to be a system out there. It's not good enough for it to be completely arbitrary, even in Italy. There needs to be a system of giving people access to communication, giving people access to the therapy they need, of assessing their cognitive skills appropriately. And I don't mean using standardized IQ tests, but to make sure that they receive the education that will best equip them for the rest of their lives. And it shouldn't be a matter of chance. Okay, sorry, I'm way out of time. I shall move.
Somebody knows more about this is going to answer the question.
Noi abbiamo un problema in Italia.
I think in Italy we have a problem, and the problem is guidelines. We have associations in Italy of, neuropsychiatrics that define guidelines which are accepted by the ministry. So these are the protocols, the guidelines, which are turned into general laws. I think there is no respect for the clinical relationship. Yesterday, I heard something very interesting. When we assess a person, we shouldn't just, assess the person as such, but we should consider the relationship between, the child and, the presence of aids or tools. But this is not done. We use the standard tests, like Wechsler test used in Australia. But then there are guidelines saying that if there is physical contact, communication is not valid, it's not communication. This is Italy. This is what happens in Italy all the time. We think, that we have the truth, we have dogma, and, everything which, doesn't respect it, which is not in line with this, is rejected because it's not considered evidence-based. But I think that we should tell to the people defining guidelines and drafting guidelines that there is no scientific evidence of the fact that myself and you, we are talking. Okay, there is no scientific evidence that we speak, that we do understand each other. There is linguistics, of course, but there is no science saying that I speak and you understand me. Okay.
Hear what you're saying there. We will let these people go on with their presentation. I'd like to talk to you more about the guidelines later. Oh, okay, I should just sit down.
Yes, take a seat. Allora, Luca dice, cara signora, ho rivisto...
Luca is saying, sorry, we just wait for a second.
Luca dice, cara
Luca is saying, dear lady, I saw the film, the movie of my life. I think that the place where I was supposed to be helped actually was the place where I was considered stupid. My psychologist never considered me, and I thought I was not worth it. But, I'm glad and happy that my family didn't follow her suggestions. Then I met Sergio and things changed, but I think there is a lot to be done. This is why I'm saying to my colleagues, do not give up. We have to work together and to be together. Sergio is the neuropsychiatric who has been, talking to you just a few minutes ago.
They can use the computer. Would you mind sitting
Oh,
here?
of course.
Eduardo also wants to speak with you.
Pezeri,
I know you've got something to say.
Sappi qualcosa da dire, vai, scrivi. Adesso la Rose che sappi qualcosa da scrivere, qualcosa da dire.
You have something to say.
Deve scaricare fuori. senza il discorso del secondo, no? Giulia. I'm in translation. Giulia. Sì, c'è un secondo di troppo, no? Comunicazione facilitata. La domanda, senza il secondo. Aspetta. Questo tiriamo via, vero? Ok, così. La domanda. La facciamo, leggiamo. Cosa facciamo? Sì, leggi. Dobbiamo attaccare o no? Diciamo, leggiamo la leggera. Ma sì.
Okay, Chiara is saying it is very interesting your proposal about facilitated communication. I have a question. We do depend upon diagnosis which is made since we are born, and throughout our life, even if we graduate, we continue to have the same diagnosis we got when we were very small. And actually she has just graduated.
I very much appreciate your comment, Cara, and I do realize that people have the diagnosis that they're born with, but that is a label, and it doesn't and shouldn't be used as determining what you can do. You've proved that you can achieve the same as other people, regardless of your diagnosis. And we have a lot of people like you who now have university degrees. We need to look at what people can do, not at the labels, and not at what they can't do. We need to work around the things that you find difficult and find the things that you're actually good at and enable you to do those things. And congratulations, you've done so well.
Eduardo has just written, "Dear Rosemary, you are a myth, a legend, an exceptional person, and you never give up, as we do. Thank you for being on our side. Thank you for being one of us. I was lucky at school, from high school indeed, and I do hope that I will attend the university as well. Thank you."
Thank you for those very kind and undeserved remarks. I'm thrilled with what you've achieved. And I hope you go on at university. Yes, it was pretty clear. Yes.
No, now you do it. Vai tu.
Who am I meant to be listening to?
Allora, Donatella.
Da leggere quello che ha scritto?
Sì, spiegare.
Aspetta un attimo.
Pronto? Sì.
Let's read what Maria Chiara wrote. She re-experienced her life at school. It was 9 years ago, but she can't, forget it. Now she is attending university, so, the period of high school is over. She is getting very high scores at university, so she demonstrated that she was right. She wanted to study, she wanted to go to university, but when she was at school, people did not consider her and her abilities. And she wrote, there are a lot of cases like the ones you described, and we cannot access adequate tools. If there are teachers, who want to understand us, well, that is a miracle. It depends on the strength of our families as well. And she just stopped here. She didn't go ahead.
You had a bad time at school. It is very strange that universities are actually doing better with a lot of our students than the schools are. And you're obviously finding it here. We found it at home.
Strange.
Anyway, congratulations on all that you've achieved, and I'll be very interested to hear about what you do in the future. We're losing our technology. That's fine.
Tranquillity. Tranquillity.
leggiamo.
Stefano, he left, but Stefano wrote, I would like to behave in a different way, in a proper manner, but I can't. And he left. And then we have Andrea. Says, thank you for the apps you have been showing to us. I want to try them straight away because I'm pretty sure they will help me. Thank you. And Chiara says, I want to thank you because it is thanks to you that I have a new life and now my thoughts have a voice and my life has a new meaning.
Lei è quella che chiedeva prima.
She's the girl asking about language because her language is there, but it's not appropriate. So she has, to restrain, her language because sometimes she can't express her thoughts.
Is that spoken language that where she has to restrain her language because it's sometimes inappropriate?
Cioè il suo
her language is, she talks all the time, but so when she talks, maybe it's not appropriate, but when she uses, facilitated communication, she makes perfect thoughts. So her language is not correct, and it is actually frustrating to her. And so so the question was, what is the problem when it comes to language? I have the thoughts in my mind, but when I try to express it, I can't express what I think. There is something different that comes out of my mouth.
Questo è un problema specifico del linguaggio.
Ah, ecco, molto
specifico.
Victor, I spoke about Victor. I have a dream. Victor has a similar problem. It's a problem of timing, a problem of word retrieval. He has worked a lot with an English app, which has helped him, and there isn't an Italian version, sadly. Yeah, I'll talk to you later, or talk to someone later about this. It's
Okay.
yeah, it's a well-known problem.
Dario ha scritto. Dove sei? Aiutami Dario. Qual è l'applicazione? Qual è? Dopo abbiamo una domanda.
Vai sedere adesso, vai sedere. Dopo ti rispondo. Rosemary,
Rosemary, you are a pure person. The word outside there is nasty.
Dario.
Dario wrote this.
I don't think many people would think that I was a pure person. I drink too much and I swear.
Sebastian dice,
Sebastian wrote, we should train trainers, we should train teachers because they have to enhance our intelligence. Please help us and we should continue to fight and struggle.
Right, you are. That's very correct. Am I?
I would like to thank Rosemary for changing my life.
Even if I am nasty to you when you make a lot of noise. Anthony and I are very old friends.
we'd like to thank Rosemary as well, the family, because Rosemary changed our lives.
Buongiorno a tutti.
Good morning. I would like to share with you my personal opinion. I listened to the story of Anne because I personally adopted a guy and he was supposed to stay in a mental health institute in his country, but now he does a lot of things. He does music, and so my personal opinion is that in January, a new legislative decree will be passed, and it refers to integration, and in particular changing the language about integration. But this doesn't mean that we will get new tools. Well, the problem is also diagnosis. Well, diagnosis is a clinical label, but the real Italian problem, so the problem we have in Italy, is also that, there are a lot of differences when it comes to clinicians who submit tests which are not adequate to the cultural context and to the persons, who have to do the tests. Very often, the emotions, the feelings of the person are not taken into consideration. And also the need for having a parent, together with the child, while doing the test, or the use of, facilitated communication. So when the potential of a child is assessed, if we use the wrong test because it is based on people who are normally developing people, well, the result will be the wrong outcome, the wrong assessment of the potentials of these children. And, we can say we are experts, but unfortunately we saw so many incorrect diagnoses. And unfortunately, this happens, and we were able to teach writing and reading to a 16-year-old guy who was diagnosed with a severe disability, and clinicians said that he would never talk, but now he does. The problem is that tests are not suitable for these people. If I have a problem, which concerns my sight, so if I can't see properly, I must use different tests and not the standard ones. It's like, buying, wine. If I buy wine, I will measure it with liters and not with meters. So we should, come up with the right tests depending on people, because I think that the tests we have now are reliable, but for people who do not exist.
Dimenticavo.
And, well, my child, I decided not to do tests with him, and, he got his diploma thanks to the fact that he did no tests at all.
Right. Well, I certainly agree with what you have said about getting the right tests or not using tests. But at some point, you do have to assess whether someone is learning. Now, the gentleman who's gone out made the point that there were guidelines that precluded, at least in some regions, in schools, the use of any communication with touch. One of the reasons that we are working so hard on enabling people to do at least multiple choice independently, and often some slow spelling or typing independently, is because a lot of our school assessments do use multiple choice, and if the student is able to clearly do the multiple choice assessments without the physical touch from another person, then that is not deniable, and the teacher has to accept those results in the classroom. And that is very helpful, because if you've got a child who's doing as well or better than the other students, using multiple choice literacy or math assessments, then you're more inclined to accept the communication that they do make with touch. I really do think working to independence is vitally important for those who can do some things independently.
Ancora.
Maria is saying, I can't think of my life without facilitated communication. Now I'm more, satisfied and happier thanks to facilitated communication. Esther wrote, I can say, I will have my disease forever, but now my thoughts are free thanks to facilitated communication, and I have a new personality.
Allora, ragazzi, piccolo cambio programma, pausa adesso.
Okay, so now we need a coffee break, and then we will, resume our work after the coffee break. Thank you.
Facciamo 20 minuti di pausa, che è più realistico.
20 minutes coffee break, but please be on time. 20 minutes coffee break. Thank you.